Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stuff I Find Interesting. This is episode 4. It'll be one of two parts, and it will be one of two parts because I got stuck in China and spent way too long. So I have too much stuff. So I got hung up on doing this because I was like, well, it's not interesting. And then I was like, nobody else will find it interesting. And then I was like, this is dumb. And then I was like, I look dumb. And then I was obsessing about the lighting. So I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. That's all there is to it. We have some improvements. We have a new mouse icon, which you can see better here. See the purple mouse icon. And can you hear that? No, you can't hear that. And do you know why you can't hear that? Because I operate it on my mouse so that it's quiet and you don't hear that click, 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 click. However, it is a little temperamental now because I sort of messed with it maybe too much. So we'll see what happens. So we are going to start with this fine thing here, and this is Jacques Degaine, or Jacques Degaine 2. He is his second, and this is the Milkmaid Helping the Crossbowman, I believe, is the name of it, and it is from the 1600s. And I came across this, and I was like, that's interesting. He's got the cod piece on. We've got some cows in the back here. So this is known as Dutch mannerism. Dutch mannerism is a form of art where things were kind of exaggerated. I have some other pictures here of Dutch mannerism. This would be Dutch mannerism. I think you've probably seen this before. I don't remember who did this, but this is part of a bigger work. And then we have El Greco, who is not Dutch, but the style, the elongation, the almost sort of leaning into impressionistic. Anyway, so this is Jacques Degaine, and this is Crossbowman assisted by a milkmaid. I was close. So who was this guy? Well, he was trained by his father, and then he went to Holland, and he wound up working for the prince. He designed a garden. He started painting some of the first nudes. He painted some of the first still lifes. If you've ever seen the pretty Dutch paintings from the 1600s that are they're black, black background, and then you have the flowers, and there's usually like insects in them. I probably should have saved a picture, but anyway. So he made history illustrations. He did all kinds of stuff. One of the coolest things I think he did is he made 117 designs for engraved illustrations in a military training manual to aid the Dutch fight for independence from Spain. So this is the 80 Years' War, where the Dutch was trying to become independent. And this guy did this manual that was sort of revolutionary at the time. There was always drill in military. It was mostly, though, as a form of exercise and discipline. And what Jacob de Gain said was, hey, we can use drill as a form of getting everybody in sequence and handling their weapons in a very specific way for maximum efficacy on the battlefield. So this is the exercise of arms. You can buy this for $39. Looks like there's one used for $40. I don't understand that, but you can buy this if you want. Very interesting. So not only did he help guide the Dutch into independence, he also helped guide the art from mannerism into realism, and things started to become painted more in a more realistic manner, which then led to painters like J.M.W. Turner, which then in turn led to the Hudson River School of Art. So it's all, it's all kind of connected. Each generation inspires the next in some way, or maybe in the opposite way. So this is the House of Sallust, in Pompeii. And this is Reverend Calvert, who we'll get back to. And Reverend Calvert is standing here in the House of Sallust. Now, what is the House of Sallust? Here it is in all of its glory. Fully painted interior view. The Reverend would be standing like approximately right here. But this is what the inside would have looked like. And as you can see, it's very fancy. So the Reverend Calvert was he was a photographer. He was an early photographer. He did some war photography, some archaeology photography like you see with Pompeii. He was very enthusiastic about the creative possibilities of photography. He just knew that there were so many possibilities that you could use for photography that weren't used before. I mean, look at how far we've come with a cell phone. You know, everybody's taking pictures of everything. Look at me, I'm taking pictures of myself right now. So, very interesting pioneer. Now, the House of Sallust, this is what it looks like today. So, if you were to go there right now, if we were to teleport me and everybody watching this to here, this is what you would see. I do believe they've put some sort of roof on. There was no roof before. Now, this is, as you can see, the House of Sallust is just one part of a much larger complex. It is a home of an elite person, basically. We have the House of Julia Felix, House of the Centenary, House of the Silver Wedding, Forum Baths, Temple of Jupiter. And here, right here, we have the House of Sallust, which is just inside Herculaneum Gate, which is kind of cool. We have some more pictures here. This is the layout. I just want to kind of go through this real quick because they're like naked people. So this is a picture, a rendering, watercolor from the period. And this is a lithograph that's on the wall. And this is what it would look like if the color was fully restored and the detail. Although it's not really all that far away from this because it's been protected for all these years. But you can see this is called a trompe l'oeil. And this is actually back in fashion. I was reading an article about home interior decoration and this kind of thing, this sort of Pompeii-esque, if you will, thing it's making a comeback. This is another watercolor of the area. This is what it actually looks like. No, I'm incorrect. This is another watercolor by Luigi Bassani. Maybe that's not Luigi. I'll have to go back. I think that might be Basoli. No, that's Bassani. Anyhow, so here we have the venerium of the House of Sallust, and the venerium would be the atrium with the opening where you can, with the light coming in, and then there's the pool of water, and it's very pretty. This would be this is a different building. What did I want to show you? Where is it? I don't know. I think that was it. So just interesting. Oh, this is another view of the House of Sallust. So this is seen from the other side, I guess. It can start to get a little confusing. There's a lot of buildings there, and in various stages of stuff. Now, if I were to say, where do you think this picture was taken, what would you say? I'll give you a minute. This is Japan, and this is taken by Felice Beato, who was one of the first photographers to take pictures of the Far East, of China. Some of our earliest pictures of Tibet. There's some Mongolia. I think there might even be some Uzbekistan in there. He took these wonderful pictures. And actually, I was incorrect. It was not Calvert that was the war photographer. It's this guy, Felice Beato, who was the war photographer. One of the first war photographers. And I say one of the first because Matthew Brady, the American during the Civil War, and his team of people was a revolutionary person in the field. Now, we're going to have a little story time. And while I tell this story, we're going to look at these pictures of Mexico. So these are some wonderful pictures of Mexico that I found. And I want to draw your attention to these things right here. So these are Atlantean figures from the Temple of Jaguars in Chichen Itza. So if you watch Ancient Aliens, they talk about Chichen Itza. How was it made? These huge blocks. How did they get them up? What happened? All interesting questions. We're not talking about that. We're talking about these figures right here. So you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 7 figures. Now, there should be more figures. There's a figure for each cardinal direction, north, south, east, and west. So in the temple, when you first walk in, there's the 4 figures, and they're facing in different directions. And as you can see, there's one missing here. One of the cardinal directions is missing. Now, once upon a time, I worked for a really wealthy guy, and he had what I believe to be one of these figurines. I don't know that for sure, but it looked like one of these things. And the house manager at the time, who gossiped about everything, told me the story about how these were put on one of them was taken and put on the black market. So when Chichen Itza was first gone into by archaeologists, they thought they were going in there for the very first time. They thought nobody had been in there. But lo and behold, they open it up, and one of these things is missing. So he had one of the north, south, east, west figure guys. I think one of the bigger ones. Just some more pictures of Mexico. Oh, I didn't realize it was going to do this. I apologize. I don't like that. We'll stop here. This is a incredible picture. I think this is the aqueduct. I'm guessing to see if I'm right before I look. Maybe Oaxaca? Cascade Fountain. Mexico City. Okay, that was close-ish. All right, we're going to move on. So last week we were talking about the Richat structure. I've heard it pronounced 2 different ways this week by 2 different experts. So I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But what I did want to talk about is how freaking big Africa is. Look at this. It's huge. Like, we think about Africa and, growing up in it. I don't know. Like, I never really thought about Africa much. In school, in geography, there wasn't really so much emphasized. But I feel like given its size and its past importance and potential importance, it should be talked about more. It should be part of more current events and more to the forefront. And you can see here's the United States, so it's quite large. I've never driven across the United States, thank God, but I've flown, and I think it was an 8-hour flight, if I recall. It was like 8 hours one way and 6 hours the other way or something. I don't know, but it would be, 12, 14, 16 hours going from one end to the other. Probably more. There's lots of probably weird currents and mountains and countries you can't fly over. So that is Africa. Now we are going to move on to Tugu Valley and Turfan, or Turpan, as the Uyghurs call it. So this is a Uyghur community in Tugu Valley, which is, I'll show you on the map where it is, but it's in the far northwest part of China. So this is the part that's was originally very Buddhist. I've actually met people from both sides of China, from, like the Beijing and the more, they live in a city with like way more people than I can even comprehend. And then I know someone who's from a rural village, probably much like this one. And the differences are pretty astounding in terms of education and just a lot of different things. Is that a cat behind me? Hi. She's mad I kicked her off in order to do this, and so she's not real happy. She was really getting into it. And I gave her the boot, Sorry, kitty. Okay, so this small Uyghur community lives in a valley nestled in a mountain range about 60 kilometers out of Turpan, in Xinjiang, China. It represents a way of life that can be traced back to the time of when Buddhism first came to China. Grottos with ancient Buddhist art are located nearby. We'll look at some of those. Despite its mountainous terrain, the village and surroundings are located on the Turpan Depression, the second lowest point on the planet. So, one of the lowest points in the entire world is in this particular area. So, now we're going to go into the next set of bookmarks, and we are going to talk a little bit more about Turpan. So this is Turpan. This is where it is. This is Xinjiang. This would be Turpan. This is Mongolia, and over here we have the stands. This is India, and then we have like Laos and Cambodia over here. And so this would be China. Japan would be over here. So that's what Turpan. That's where Turpan is located in the world. Now this is a cool picture that I came across of a building in Turpan. So Turpan is, I'll show you on the larger map, it's part of the Silk Road, which is a fascinating area. As you can see, I've talked about it several times now. I think it's a collision of so much stuff, of culture and history and architecture and people. It just makes for very interesting study. So this is one of the houses that's in, one of the old houses that's in near Turpan. And if we scroll over, this is one of the archaeological sites that's just outside Turpan. And this is Xiaohe. I looked all these things up, but it's still hard for me to say. It's difficult. Xiaohe, I believe, near Turpan. This is an ancient city. You can see how it's weathered. This is an old building, so you can imagine how old it must be to look like that, because this is a fairly dry area where these particular structures are located. Now, if we talk about Turpan just a little bit, we have the depression, or what's known as the Tarim Basin, and this is in the 3rd century. And you can see all the different peoples that live here that would potentially cause conflict and strife, right? Because they're all cohabitating together. This is what some of the local folk might have looked like, with some of their houses in the background. This is talking about the Qatars, which I'll also talk about. This is the water system. This is a mock-up, which looks simple but is actually quite sophisticated. These are the Flaming Mountains, which are at the base of these other mountains, and then you have the depression. This is just a beautiful kind of walkway thing. So the Turpan dynasty, or the Turpan, look at it. We have the Gaochang, the Tang, the Uyghur, the Idkut, the Turpan, conversion to Islam, 15th and 16th centuries, 18th and 19th centuries, 20th and 21st centuries, right to right now. So it's an area that's still in conflict. Now, something that I learned that was interesting is that they practice Manichaeism. And Manichaeism is a form of Gnosticism. It's a religion that sort of came about when Christianity came about, and it was very popular at a certain time. And it's interesting to think that it might have been the thing that sort of took over Christianity, but it didn't. Christianity took over that. Manichaeism is like other religions. It's a guy who said, I'm the prophet, I know everything, and he said that these other guys, they had parts of the truth. Jesus had a part of the truth, Buddha had part of the truth, but not the whole truth. I have the whole truth. And it's based on the struggle between a good spiritual world of light and an evil material world of darkness. An inherent of Manichaeism is called Manichae in older sources. So that I thought was interesting. I don't think there's really any pictures interesting to show you, except that this is how far it went. So we have China, the Tarim Basin, which we're talking about now, and it kind of spread over here through Persia, Egypt, and we can see it went up all the way up to Britannia. That's fairly significant, I would say. It's a fairly large area. So it's a religion that maybe you might want to learn more about, because it's fascinating how it almost became the religion. Okay, Turpan. Turpan, Turpan, Turpan. Okay, so we have Mongolia, the Stans, China, India, Burma, Laos, Bangladesh. All right, now we have Turpan. And then the biggest city around Turpan is called Urumqi, I believe is how you say it. Urumqi, and that's this place right here. So we're going to scroll into Turpan, and we can see that, yes, it is very green. It is definitely an oasis. These are the Flaming Mountains, which we just saw. And here we have Turpan, and we can scroll all the way in, and we can see we have these very orderly kind of houses that all sort of look very similar. But like any other normal city, right, we've got some fountains and looks like some green areas. It's set up like a normal city. I suspect some of the stuff out here is probably blacked out or whited out or whatever the case may be. Now this is Turpan Pendi, and Turpan Pendi is, I'll show you some pictures in a moment, are the lowest spot in the world. The second lowest spot in the world. These are some pictures of Xinjiang. Here we have a yurt, some ruins. This is the city. We have some mosques. Here's the mountains. This is just to sort of give you the feel of what we're talking about. I could talk about this all day, but I'm not going to. We're just sort of glancing over the surface of a culture that you may know nothing about. I know I didn't know anything about this place. So it's very, very fascinating. This looks like it's a mummy, probably a very ancient one, and it goes on and on and on. Now this is the 1,000 Buddha caves, and I have some pictures that I'll show you of that, I believe. I can just show you that now. So these are caves that have been around for like 2,000 years, but this is the side that the tourists can go in. There's another side where it's where you can kind of clearly see. Okay, we're not going there, apparently. If I keep ducking my head, it's because I put the camera right in front of me this time so that you can see my face better. But as a result, there's like a blind spot, so I have to sort of get creative. So this is a qanat. Qanat has a series of holes. It's would be built on an ascent with the mother well that goes down into the aquifer, and it is a system that still exists today. So all that green that you saw, it's because of this. Here we have some pictures of the qanat. You can see the holes in the ground, and they look random, right? You've got like one that's randomly here, one that's randomly here. There's actually a specific purpose for the placement of each one of those holes. And it's actually so important that it's considered a UNESCO heritage site because of its innovation. And it was like way super, I wouldn't say ahead of its time. There were probably other cultures that were doing this at the same time, probably simultaneously, but it's amazing that it's still in use. I think that's the part that's like really cool. And then I just want to show you this guy. Yeah, I'm not going in there. That doesn't look very good. We're not doing that. No, no. Okay. So, interestingly, is that the scientists are saying, hey, like, the Canat is like a really long-lasting way to deal with water in an environmentally beneficial way. So they're looking at it for other areas that might have similar topography. Here we have the lowest point in the world. And this is it right here. And you can see it looks very low. Very low. And here are some pictures of the area. Those are the Flaming Mountains. A lot of statues here. More mountains. Another statue. Another statue. Camels. Tourist center. Low spot. The Painted Desert Mountains, I think. You have a mosque in the middle of nowhere. That's probably a watchtower. Overly enhanced picture, but you can see how jagged and intense those mountains are. Another statue. Another statue. Another statue. The mountains in the background, pretty intense, right? You got this thing. Another thing I find interesting is that this is in predominantly Fahrenheit, so it's interesting. It's not in Celsius, it's in Fahrenheit. And we have another statue. So that is Hawaiian Mountain, which is this area right here. So Turpin is over here, and here's Hawaiian Mountain, and you can see this is the larger mountain range, and then it goes down dramatically, and then there's this other mountain range, and then that goes down dramatically, and then there's this very deep depression that historically has been an oasis on the Silk Road because of its ability to use water. All right, so we looked at that. Now, something I saw that was interesting, and that is this, kind of in the middle of nowhere. The Autonomous Region Popularization of Science Education Base. And we have these roads here, which might be new construction or it might be whited out. The thing I thought that was really interesting, and of course I'm not going to be able to find it now. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. East of that is this thing. It's a giant earthwork carved into the ground next to this thing, which is also next to this thing. So I'm thinking that's probably not a go-kart track, but I'm not really sure what it is. But I didn't look very hard either. I just kind of went, oh wow, that's interesting. And I saved it. All right, so we are going to start to wrap up part 1 of this. We are moving along quite well here, I think. We don't want to overwhelm you with stuff. So there's this guy I thought was very interesting, and he's very passionate about the Tarim Basin. But I like what he has to say. On the western fringes of China lays a mammoth sea of sand surrounded on nearly all 4 sides by dry, forbidden mountains. An inhospitable, burning dead zone that was so massive that, to put into perspective, was the size of Ukraine, or that of France plus Switzerland, Belgium, and the Netherlands. It was a flashpoint of rival empires, as well as a conduit of many rich, exotic traditions. This is some art that has come from the area. During the first millennium of its history, the region was frequently a site of endless war between the three great powers surrounding the region, the various Han Chinese empires, the Tibetan Empire, and the ferocious tribes from beyond the steppes. This series will largely focus on the region's turbulent history and its peculiar political dynamic from, from 2nd century BC to the 11th century BC. And then I just want to say this before I show you a few more pictures. If one were to look at the broad strokes of the 2,500-year history of the region, one would discover a vast assortment of empires and confederacies that have laid claims over the region, stamped their culture in the region, only then to be displaced by another group of foreigners in an endless cycle. No other region in the world, with the exception of the Levant and Sicily, has been a ceaselessly sparring ground where foreign overlords dueled. For 2 millenniums, the Tarim Basin has been a measuring stick for any ascendant powers that could hold it, and a death knell for any power that fails to keep it. So we have this guy, we have the ghosts of the empires behind him. Apparently there's a movie about this, so I'm going to have to check that out. This is some scenes from this movie that kind of represent the time, and I'm going to end with this. It was only when one zoomed out of the greater trend of the history of the region that one would see what the region really was, a trap, an entanglement and exertion for all of its would-be protectors and possessors. The empires come, they fight, they die, but across the 1,000 years, only the natives' petty rivalry remained. And here we have the inner palace of Gao Chang, which was one of another oasis, which was slightly southeast of Turpan. Now, interestingly enough, that there were, they found Caucasian mummies with high cheekbones and red hair in this area, which is interesting. So they found redheaded people. So maybe that's where I come from. Maybe I'm from Turpan. I don't think so. It's too hot. I think I'm more of a mountain seasonal kind of person. Now, I lied. I actually have one more quick thing. So, why would China be so intent on getting their hands on this particular area, this Xinjiang? Why? There's nothing there other than archaeology. And it's because there's a lot of stuff in those mountains. Specifically cobalt deposits. That's the big thing right now because they're used for electric batteries. You might have heard a lot of stuff about the cobalt deposits in Africa. There was someone on the Joe Rogan show a couple weeks ago that was talking about the cobalt mines in Africa and the horrible, horrible conditions. So there's a bunch of stuff that's found there. So this is part of the reason why there's this movement to sort of take over this area and control it. Also, China's huge. In order to control it, this is the tactic that the CCP has chosen, which is just control, like really control. I don't know how you could do it. I lied again. One more thing. See? These are the oldest known trousers in the world. It's from 1122 to 926 BC, and these are the oldest known pants that still survive. And you can see it's very contemporaneous to what we would have today. We've got the stuff around the knees to reinforce it. Looks like there's some reinforcement there. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Now, did you know that the North Pole and true north are two different things? I'm sure you did. Most people do. However, what you probably didn't know is how far and wide the North Pole has traveled. True North Pole has traveled in the past 100 or so years. And you can see it started over here and now it's heading to Russia. It's going in this direction, and you can see that it's starting to pick up in pace according to this particular chart. I don't know what comes after this. It could be longer, it could be shorter, but it seems as though it is picking up pace, and scientists believe that this have to um, might lead to the reversal of the poles, which you might have heard something about, the magnetic reversal, where the South Pole becomes the North Pole, and North Pole becomes the South Pole. That's a whole other conversation. We're not going to go there today. But one of the reasons why this happens is because there's these two blobs in the center of the Earth, and they're like a lava lamp. They kind of bloop, 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 and on a cycle, a very long one, when one of those bloops gets bigger, the pole will migrate to there, and then when this pole gets bigger, it'll migrate to here. So it has to do with the way these things move. It's obviously way more complicated than that, and I'm not explaining it probably very well. But it's fascinating to think that true north is just, it's on the move. It's making a run for it. Now we're going to finish off part 4, part A of part 4, with some conspiracy theory time. So there's been a lot of talk with, you might have seen the Graham Hancock Netflix show talking about prehistory and how there have been undoubtedly other cultures that existed that we know nothing about that have been wiped out, and then cultures that came again that existed and have been wiped out, along with knowledge and other things. And the thing I like about Graham Hancock is he's not saying aliens. He's not saying these were giants or these are superheroes. He's saying these were regular people that existed, got wiped out. And then from the remnants of that population, a new population was born. And the ultimate theory is that we are part of the most recent reset population. And by reset, I don't mean what you hear in the conspiracy sites with COVID and the pandemic. I mean like an actual for real reset, like meteorite out of the sky, tsunami reset. So this is new evidence of past civilizations, and it's not really new evidence. It's not really talked about a whole lot, I don't feel. I mean, I read a lot of archaeology online, and it's interesting to see what is emphasized and what isn't emphasized. And I go to as many other countries' websites as I can to try to see what the difference is. So anyway, ruins in the stands. We're talking about Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Evidence of a lost civilization in Central Asia. In the 1950s, Victor Sarianidi discovered the ruins of an ancient civilization known as the Bactrian Margina Archaeological Complex, BMAC, centered in the Murghab oasis of Turkmenistan. He believed that the people who settled in this region had migrated east from Anatolia, that's Turkey, today, by way of Mesopotamia in search of arable land. Others argue this civilization, which is also known as the Oxus civilization, was indigenous to the region, preceded by earlier civilizations dating back to the 7th millennium BCE. An analysis of archaeological sites in Central Asia reveals that relatively few are aligned to the cardinal points or in astronomical directions, such as solstices or lunar standstills. So, this particular guy, they found this complex, and it was different than the other complexes. And he's like, it doesn't match up, but what? Maybe it matches up like from a really long time ago. And so, he did the math, and he did the math, and he did the math, and he discovered that it was an earlier civilization that existed up to the last ice age. Bordered by the Caspian Sea to the west and what's left of the Aral Sea to the north, much of Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan are deserts. At the time of the last glacial maximum, that's when, if you've seen the pictures of all the glaciers like on top, New York was absolutely covered. Around 20,000 years ago, sea levels were approximately 120 meters below current levels, and the string of basins stretching from the Black Sea east to the Caspian and Aral Seas were cut off from the Mediterranean Sea. At that time, the glaciers in the Hindu Kush were significantly larger Fed by those glaciers, the volume of water in rivers flowing north into Central Asia was greater than it is today, forming a large freshwater lake in the basin now occupied by the Caspian and Aral Seas. A similar freshwater lake in the Black Sea basin, fed by rivers flowing south from Central Europe, also existed at this time. So um, this shows that. When the glacial period had ended, the climate in Central Asia became increasingly arid and these lakes began to shrink in size. So it's proposed that the Mediterranean Sea rose very abruptly, and there's this sort of strait, and it broke through the strait, and it flooded, and it created what's known as a cascade of Eurasian basins that existed 9,000 to 17,000 years ago. The area of the inland sea was about 6 times greater than that of the Great Lakes of North America. The timing and magnitude of the flood event would have been an impressive phenomena to late Paleolithic humans and would have been reflected in old epic poems and mythology. And it is, right? There's like these great floods. It's in every single culture. It has something about a great flood. And that's because I think they happen a lot. And I think cultures get wiped out a lot. And I think it's not really talked about because we don't want to look at the fact that we could be wiped out so easily. It's crazy that we're even alive. It's crazy that I'm even sitting here. So it became more arid. The water levels went down. And the Aral Sea is also currently in a shrinking. You might have seen the pictures of the in the Middle East of the desert with boats in the middle of kind of nowhere, perched on the sand, and that's what the Aral Sea looks like. So where was I going with this? There was something else I wanted to say. So this guy Victor, he found as many as 4 temples built on top of each other. So there was like a temple, another culture came along, built a temple, another culture came along and built a temple. And this is something that exists all throughout that area. But as you know, that area is very commonly um, lit up by strife. So it makes going out there to explore it difficult. And also, a lot of these places are like in the middle of nowhere. At the time they existed, they weren't considered to be in the middle of nowhere, obviously, but they are now. So this goes into the solstice and the directions and how it lines up. And and let's see. I had a point, and I lost it. Here we go. The signature of a lost civilization. So he's postulating that based on the alignments that it existed. He's just going on and on about that. So anyway, and then it references the Epic of Gilgamesh. But the point is, the ultimate point that I was making is that civilizations have existed before, and I think that's just an absolute given. I think it's just like, of course, civilizations existed before. We're like the only like people within like 100,000 years to make tools and do stuff. I think there have been lots of different types of people. Um, there are caves in Armenia and Georgia that are astounding, that would lead one to believe that they're very ancient and precede um, this most recent time in human history. In Malta, there are these track marks embedded in the rock that seem indicative of some sort of cart system. Um, and then there are these caves also in Malta that have harmonics. So when you stand in a certain way, the sound does stuff. I mean, it's just wild. It's just wild. And I think a lot of the knowledge has been lost. And like I said, not like alien knowledge or I can move stuff with my mind, but there might have been a different way of doing things that was way more efficient than we could ever imagine. Perhaps it was done with sound. Um, Perhaps it was done with, uh, I don't know. I have no idea. But it's interesting to think about. And it kind of fills one with wonder to think about the fact that there have just been people around for like a really long time. And it's like that line in Jurassic Park, which is life finds a way. And it sure does. So that's really all I have. I'm just going to bring up a really nice picture. And this is just a cave that I thought was cool. The artist, we want to give credit to the artist. The artist is Mattis Garage, and he made this cool cave. And I think it's cool if we look at it. It's very old world and kind of similar to what we've been looking at. And there are caves in the world that are this big, that have this type of topography with water. But I've yet to see one that has a cave complex within the cave itself. I'm sure it exists. And with that, I am going to move my head and find the button. Oh my god. I'll get it someday. So with that, part 2 of 4 soon to come.